Welcome to Sweet Sycamore. We are in episode 9 of our Esther series, and today we are digging into chapter 5. I just want to encourage you, if you feel like you're getting something out of this and actually want to start a small group to be able to dig into this within a community of people, we actually have free Bible study guides available at sweetsycamore.com. So if that's something you're interested in, I've been creating those, and those are free to access on that website. But today we're going to get right into chapter 5. And starting on verse 1, it says, on the third day of the fast. Now remember, Esther had told Mordecai, okay, fine, I'll go before the king, but she was scared. Remember, if I die, I die. It was almost like, I'm probably going to die, but go ahead and fast, and let's just go for this in 3 days. And so here we are on the third day of the fast. Esther put on her royal robes and entered the inner court of the palace, just across from the king's hall. The king was sitting on his royal throne facing the entrance. When he saw Queen Esther standing there in the inner court, he welcomed her and held out the gold scepter to her. So Esther approached and touched the end of the scepter. This seems so simple. It's like, Esther, what were you so stressed about? Why were you saying, if I die, I die? But I think sometimes the scriptures give us a really quick synopsis of maybe a really intense, stressful situation. So let's not downplay this moment at all. In Persepolis, an excavation revealed, kind of engraved in stone, King Xerxes seated on his throne with his royal scepter in hand, and he was flanked by various officials with a soldier to his side with an axe. So this is actually historically accurate. Esther was playing Russian roulette with a man who had a problem of killing thousands of people with a flick of his pen. Remember, he didn't even ask Haman who he was killing as he put down his royal ring, saying this is going to happen. And also he was willing to take out his wife with one moment where she embarrassed him. And here comes Esther walking in uninvited in the presence of the king. And this is also going to surpass the authority of the king. Because remember, she cannot come to the king without being invited. And she is coming into the royal court. She's not coming at nighttime in secret with nobody around. She is coming with all the officials around her. So then I have to ask, why? Why did you go to the king in this manner? But let's remember that once an edict is put into place by the king himself, not even the king himself can take it back. It has been put into law. It has already gone out into all the provinces. There are only two options for this to be revoked, and that is either she has to get into the ear of the trusted officials of the king. Do you remember how the king is constantly going to his officials and getting their opinions and following through with that? We have seen this already multiple times in the story, and I'm sure Esther was aware of that. Or she has to get the king so mad that he is going to make sure something happens on his own accord. So it makes sense why she actually had to go into the inner court where the king's officials sat with him and helped him make decisions. Now, Josephus was a historian in about 60 AD, so obviously he is hundreds of years removed from the story of Esther, but we actually see Josephus as a historian at the time. There is a lot of historical facts that he seems to get really accurate. So he's a lot closer to the Esther stories in the timeline than obviously we are. Now, here's what he says about the story of Esther and when she actually goes to the king. Josephus says that she was so afraid that one maid helped her stand while the other held the train of her dress. Upon arrival to King Xerxes, she fell down sideways in a swoon as her joints failed her. Although the king was filled with anger at first, he changed his mind by the concern for his wife. He leaped from his throne and took her into his arms and comforted her. He then put the top of the scepter in her hands. And she said, "My lord, it is not easy for me, suddenly, to say what has happened. For as soon as I saw you to be great and comely and terrible, my spirit departed from me, and I had no soul left in me." I don't know if this is actually true, guys. This is Josephus' historical account of what has been passed down, word of mouth, of what has happened in this exact throne room. But no matter what, we know that this was a major moment for Esther, something that she was absolutely terrified to do. And we do know that from the scriptures as she says, I die, I'm probably going to die. Her nerves at that moment, perhaps the slow motion of that moment of the axe and the scepter, and which one is going to get to her first. Okay, yes, her life is spared. We see that this resolves the cliffhanger, but does it? Does it really? Like, her life may be spared, but what about the entire Jewish community? What is she really going to do? We just spoke about how the king himself couldn't even revoke the law. It's believed that this was set in place so that way it would discourage an uprising. Like if somebody didn't like the king's laws, they couldn't just get a new king in his place because the old laws would follow into the new king's reign. So even if the king could not get rid of the previous law, what is Esther to do? It's like she's standing before a lock that cannot be unlocked. However, she has to try, and she has been given a very unique skill set by God. She probably feels defeated even before she's begun, but she stands and she tries and she uses what she has. We know this in verse 3 when it says, Then the king asked her, What do you want, Queen Esther? What is your request? I will give it to you even if it is half the kingdom. He has to see her nerves. He has to know that this is costing her a lot to actually come before him in his presence with all of his royal officials and risk her life. He is aware of all of this in this moment. And that is why he is actually willing to give her half of his kingdom. So why didn't she just say it? Why didn't she just get over it in that moment and say, well, actually, I need you to save the Jewish people. I need us to find a way to make it so they don't all die 11 months from today. I think sometimes we rush things. Anybody feel like you rush things? I am great at rushing things. For instance, I will say yes before I really think about what the yes cost me, just because it moves me on from that moment. I was 13 years old and I was in Kazakhstan on a mission trip. And this guy comes up to me and just starts talking to me in Kazakh, and I have no idea what he is saying, and I'm just trying to get out of this awkward moment, and I just say, yeah, okay, and I walk away. And a translator came up to me and said, do you know what you just said yes to get out of that awkward situation? I said, no. She goes, you just agreed to marry his son. Okay, so obviously that didn't happen. I didn't actually marry him. But that is who I am. I tend to rush things. I tend to just get things over in the moment, and they could matter in the big life scheme of things. And here with Esther, she could have done the same thing. He offered her half the kingdom. She could have easily said, could you just find a way to save the Jews? But she doesn't. She doesn't. Why doesn't she? It's because she is asking for a reversal of an irreversible law sponsored by the most powerful man outside of the king in the kingdom with the king's signet ring. And she is in the presence of the most powerful people right now in the king's throne room, who are all going to make sure that the king's authority isn't questioned. Remember, Queen Vashti, she also has to kind of lose face because she has got to tell him, in order for him to understand why this is so important to her, a very intimate detail about herself that she has hidden at this point for roughly 5 to 6 years, roughly we believe that they have been married. And that is that she is a Jewish woman. I mean, how could she possibly make this request seem favorable to the king where he doesn't actually rise against her, that she has hidden a secret from him, and that she is actually questioning his authority? So that's why in verse 4 it says, And Esther replied, If it please the king, let the king and Haman come today to a banquet I have prepared for the king. The king turned to his attendants and said, Tell Haman to come quickly to a banquet, as Esther has requested. So the king and Haman went to Esther's banquet. I love this because she is actually prepared. She is saying, come to a banquet today. This is not something she's throwing together. I'll see you in 2 weeks. She has this banquet all ready to go. She knows what request she is getting ready to ask him. And she doesn't allow herself to be rushed just because the king has already offered her half of the kingdom. Instead, she is actually choosing to honor King Xerxes and Haman with a banquet. When you gave somebody a banquet, this was a way to honor them during this period of time. Who would be the hardest people in Esther's life for her to honor? Wouldn't it be Haman, the man who has put a time and date stamp for the slaughter of her and all of her people, and even perhaps her husband, who just simply goes along with the plan without asking any questions? She is choosing to honor two people that would be the hardest to honor in her life at this moment. And this shows us a beautiful skill set that God has already equipped Esther with to walk through this hard moments. You see, Esther has a quality of meekness. Webster's is going to define meekness as being deficient in courage and being weak. Yet Jesus says in Matthew 5:5, "Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth." Jesus actually calls us to be meek. So what truly is meekness? It is strength under control. It is restraints that come from within. It breeds a life of humility, and God honors humility. Why? Because humility says it's not about us and it's all about God. It's a quality of a heart. When a person is willing to accept and submit without resistance to the will and desire of God, whatever happens, happens. That is a beautiful quality of meekness. And that is why she is able to actually honor people in her life that really don't deserve her honor. It makes me question even myself on if I were to have a meekness meter in my own life, where would I be on that meter? Am I somebody who is willing to accept and submit without resistance the will and the desire that God has for me, even when it is incredibly tough for me to step into? Well, I definitely think Esther would have been probably a 10 out of 10 on this, because it says in verse 6, "And while they were drinking wine, the king said to Esther, 'Now tell me what you really want. What is your request? And I will give it to you, even if it is half the kingdom.'" Xerxes knew that she wasn't just going to risk her life for nothing. She wasn't going to risk her life just so she could have dinner with him and Haman. There has to be more to this. But now he is also drunk with wine. I mean, why not ask now? He is happy with her. He is happy with her company. He is happy with his wine. And he has given her the same response that he will do anything for her. And he has actually given her this response now in the presence of Haman. Remember, when she asked previous in the throne room, he had to go get Haman to tell him to come to the dinner. Haman wasn't there. So now he has said in the presence of Haman, whatever she wants, it's hers, even if it is half the kingdom. But verse 7, Esther replied, "This is my request and deepest wish, if I have found favor with the king, and if it pleases the king, to grant my request and do what I ask." Now the verse goes on, but I would like to think that she's about ready to ask. Doesn't it sound like that? If it pleases the king to grant my request and do what I ask. It's almost like perhaps there may have been a pause here. Is this the moment? Should I be asking now? But then she goes on to say, "Please come with Haman tomorrow to a banquet I will prepare for you. Then I will explain what this is all about." She basically says, I'm about ready to ask, but you know what? I'll explain tomorrow. But I would love your company one more time. Why? Why doesn't she just ask in this moment? I'm going to tell you guys something important that I have learned over the course of my lifetime, and I believe that Esther is applying here, is there's going to be moments when power has been given to us, when it seems like we have the authority in that moment to do what we need to do, ask what we need to ask, but still the timing is not right. But then there's moments when the power has been given to us and we feel like it's God's timing. And that, my friends, is a magical moment. Here's what I mean by this. I have been in many conversations in my life where people will say, "Look at all these open doors. I feel like I'm supposed to walk through them." Some people will even to go as far as to say, "Look, God has opened these doors." And I'm going to ask the question, but did he? A lot of times we can take open doors, the power for us to be able to make decisions that this must be God. But my question is, did God give you permission to walk through those open doors? Do you believe that sometimes things in life can just work out and things look like this could be a great open door? But did we actually ask God, am I actually supposed to walk through this door? Did I look for a sign from him? Did I find out not only do I have power, I have the power. You have the power to walk through open doors. Yes, the power belongs to you. When that door is open, you can walk through it. But do you have permission? Power and permission have to go hand in hand. Esther has been given the power in this moment to be able to ask, but she doesn't feel like she has the permission. Remember, she has been fasting for 3 days. And I do believe, although God's name is not being mentioned here, that he is guiding her. And she is seeking both power and permission. But she is doing it with such a meek spirit. Did you hear that in verse 8 when she says, if I have found favor with the king, if it pleases the king, she is still honoring him. Why? Well, remember, King Xerxes, a king who is over the most vast empire ever on record, he thinks he is God. I mean, that was the role of the king during this time, was to play God. Meekness is going to be viewed as something in his presence as attractive when you are looking at him as God. Could she have been playing the king? I mean, Esther is playing into the king's own weakness to save her people, and that is the love for himself. Let me honor you one more time. Let me bring you to one more banquet. And we're going to see here to come that even Haman thinks, woo, who am I that Esther wants to eat with me one more time? She is taking her time. She is not rushing these moments. And perhaps even sparking the king's own curiosity. I mean, if he says it a third time, whatever you want, even half of the kingdom. I mean, if he goes back on his own words when he has said it 3 times, once in the presence of every official, the second in front of Haman, and even the third in a dinner with Haman, could he really go back on that? And so she is going to ride this as long as she can to make sure that even he can't go back on his request that he has offered her. She is playing the pieces of chess when here we have Haman and King Xerxes. They're pretty much playing checkers, right? But she is playing it with patience and care. And she's being cunning, but doing it in a way that still honors. A lot of times we think cunning has to be a way to tear people down. But God, man, God is full of so much wisdom. There is a way for us to outsmart our enemy using what God has given us, using the tools that God has given us, because he will win. And sometimes it does take a cunning spirit. It takes a patient spirit. And that is exactly where Esther is. She has the power, but she is waiting for permission. This will give her the best chances of success. I just want to encourage you guys today to kind of walk through these questions that we asked. I mean, where are you at on your meekness meter? Are you willing to kind of take that passenger seat and allow God to truly drive your life where it needs to go? Do you have control over your own strength? Nobody's questioning. Sometimes as women, we can be very strong women. I am a type A. I am a strong woman. And I like to make decisions and I like to walk through open doors. But do I also have control over that strength that God has given me, where I submit that to him? So there can be moments where I can honor those that I just really don't feel like honoring because I know that that's what he's asking me to do. Are there also moments that when I have the power, I am willing to submit and say, I don't have the permission, and I need to actually not walk through this door until I know for sure this is the door God wants me to walk through? Meekness is a beautiful characteristic, and we see this in Esther, but I want to remind you again of the blessing that Jesus gives us in Matthew 5:5. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. In other words, he wants to bless those who are meek. He wants to make sure you have everything you need, but that also makes sure that our strength is coming from him. And we only walk in that strength when he has said, yes, now's the time. Let's go. Hey, we hope that God has spoken to you through today's podcast. We'll be back again next Wednesday as we finish up chapter 5.